Damn it, Janet, stop charging by the hour.
Hi there, this is Janet Gershon-Siegel from Samantha Shenanigans, and for today's extra, I want to talk about independent writers and how they need to protect themselves, because I'm an independent writer, and believe me, these scams come at me as well. So let's look out for each other, folks. Okay. So the question is, if you're an independent writer, and actually if you're an independent artist of any sort, not just a writer, but maybe a singer or a sculptor or a painter, etc., there's all sorts of issues that go on because the internet, not only does the internet deliver great stuff to us really quickly, it also delivers not so good stuff really quickly. And this goes, and for writers, to get down to writers in particular, this goes beyond your usual expected issues such as maybe writer's block, or finding a good crop of dependable beta readers, querying your work, that sort of thing. It even goes beyond things like imposter syndrome and dealing with less than stellar reviews. So for a lot of independent authors, you can sum up how they started in 2 words: fan fiction. Let me tell you, that applies to me as well. There is no shame in starting off with fan fiction. In fact, it's a fantastic way to begin writing because you start to get a sense of things like what characters really mean and why they're different, and how to start and end what you're doing. And you do it all without having to come up with a new universe, which is very helpful. It's a lot easier to just sort of plunge in and start writing. But when it came to my paid writing career, which is a whole other ball of wax, I had a great fortune. Basically what happened was I was a contest winner for a reputable publisher. They were looking for a novel in 2013 from what's called NaNoWriMo, which stands for November is National Novel Writing Month, and it's basically a challenge for writers, whether independent or not, published or not, to write 50,000 words within the month of November. I did this in 2013. In fact, I've done this every year since then. And the book was basically finished. And actually, I told my mother that I had finished writing a book. And she said, "Oh, you're going to get it published." And I hadn't even thought about that. So I started looking online, like, who would publish this? And I really did stumble upon this publishing company and their contest. However, most indies really can't make that kind of a claim. They slog. They're in the trenches a lot. They still want to be published, but a contest doesn't sort of fall into their lap. So instead, they may very well be. They do this for a while. It's very hard to be an independent writer. Actually, it's hard to be a writer, period. But to be an independent writer without much of a reputation, what that means is that your work is almost always relegated to the slush pile, which is the stuff that comes in. It's the unsolicited manuscripts. And there's often huge piles, even for tiny independent publishers. These stacks are longer than your arm. They're taller than your head. And it's hard even for these publishers to get out a rejection letter to the writers because they're so busy and there's so much to read. In the meantime, the indie on the other side, they might be getting fed up from this, or it's kind of soul crushing to be rejected all the time. So they may want to take the first thing that looks legitimate at all. Also, when a person writes in kind of a rare genre or a rare space, such as LGBTQ, they may have a fear, rightly or wrongly, that the readership would be hard to find. And so that might also dictate to the independent writer who they say yes to. All of that stuff came together with the implosion of a distributor. It was basically a retailer called All Romance eBooks. As you might expect, they would retail romance novels. However, they also had a rather thriving LGBTQ section. And as a result, writers within that space, they took a big interest And they were also interested because they were promised 60% of all revenues. It was a really generous package. So, of course, writers jumped at this chance. However, in late 2016, it all fell apart. According to a blog called Blogcritics, on December 28, 2016, All Romance eBooks released a surprise notice from its owner, Lori James. And she said, quote, "We will be unable to remit Q4 2016 commissions in full and are proposing a settlement of 10 cents on the dollar, US dollars, for payments received through 27 December 2016. So that was the day before. We also request the following conditions. Number 1, that you consider this negotiated settlement to be paid in full. And number 2, that no further legal action be taken with regards to the above referenced commissions owed." End quote. So basically what happened is that Ms. James and All Romance essentially presented authors with what anybody would look at and say is a take it or leave it proposal. We give you 10 cents on the dollar and you agree not to sue us. If you're a writer, if you were part of this, you should be incensed because basically their 60% carrot that they were dangling in front of people in order to get them to sign meant nothing. Their contracts were meaningless, and they were just looking for, they were looking to pay pennies, and they were also looking to not be sued. Hey, don't bother us. We gave you some money, right? Of course, writers were outraged, particularly when Ms. James also framed her statement as being a way for All Romance to avoid bankruptcy. Writers were understandably really angry that if they played along and swallowed 1/6 of what they were supposed to be getting and agreed not to sue, that it would be this enormous, lovely favor they would be doing for All Romance. And of course, for the most part, they balked. Furthermore, bankruptcy has several rather specific rules. One of them is that the bankruptcy court, what they do is they decide who gets the money in what order, and almost always it's secured creditors are going to come first. These are usually people who they've got a lot more to it than just somebody saying, "Hey, you owe me money." So that the money could have been divvied up in a very different fashion if it was going through regular old bankruptcy proceedings. However, I'm sure that Ms. James didn't want a bankruptcy on her record, and she didn't want it on All Romance's record as well. Indies, in addition to all of this, they felt even more outraged than any other writers. At least that's the way I saw it, because they realized that the bigger publishers were most likely to get their share of this tiny pie, whereas the small presses and your standard indie writer would most likely be at the bottom of the payment list. And then it got weirder. The following day, December 30th, 2016, Blogcritics again, they followed up on the story, and they reported that in 2014, the company, this is All Romance, had already engaged in some questionable business practices. And because 2 years previously, conflict took place between Lori James and her then business partner, Barbara Perfetti-Ulmer. In addition, Ulmer sued James and All Romance eBooks in the 6th Judicial Circuit Court of Pinellas County, Florida, on March 2nd, 2015. All Romance was established. This is because All Romance was established as a legal business entity there. So that's where they weren't really incorporated, but that's where the limited corporation came from. This is why doing research online is kind of helpful. Ulmer's complaint basically alleged that James had been, quote, denying access to contemporaneous and current financial information related to All Romance, breach of duties, including fiduciary care and loyalty, unjust enrichment, inequitable distribution, and judicial dissolution of All Romance, end quote. I don't have a lot more on that because the case settled out of court. But be that as it may, if the folks who who were putting their books up on All Romance had looked and had dug a little bit deeper, they should have found that case, because legal cases in the interest of the public are always public records. Now, little bits of them here and there might not be public. You can get something declared confidential. You might be able to get it so that it's so there's just like a shell of a document that you don't really see it, that it's redacted. But the fact that a case is brought, that is a matter of public record. That's not doxing, folks. It's public record. The government puts these records out there for the benefit of and protection of the public. So now, enraged indie writers, they got serious. They organized a Facebook group in order to try to start talking to lawyers and initiate a class action lawsuit. And the Bird Campbell firm, they took on the case. So if you think you could possibly be a part of this certified class, not certified yet, and since All Romance may have also taken down paid ebooks, you could be a member of this class even if you're a reader and you're not a writer at all, folks. Yeah, they did that too. Go ahead and contact a guy named Tucker Harrison Bird. He's at the Bird Campbell law firm. It's real easy to find them online, and the links are in the blog post too. Finally, as always, I really just want you to protect yourselves. That's job one. Always be looking to protect yourself. It doesn't mean that you never ever trust people, and it doesn't mean that people aren't, for the most part, trustworthy and honest. The truth is, the vast majority of people are honest and they're wonderful. And maybe they're not necessarily the best at doing business, but they at least aren't trying to rip you off. However, you still should be vigilant. It's the old expression, trust but verify. You should verify. So dig for information before you accept any offers or you sign any contracts. Keep a critical eye out. Keep your skeptical antenna up, okay? Because deals which seem too good to be true probably are. And so spend some time. Look at public records. Look for things like bankruptcies. Look for court cases. Anybody can be sued. And they can be sued unjustly. But look deeper. Is a site being sued a lot? That might tell you something too. Also LinkedIn. That might be another decent source of information. If you have the name of the owner, you may be able to start finding them on LinkedIn, because a lot of people who aren't into social media tend to be on LinkedIn all the same because it's good for their business. So be skeptical. You can be optimistic, certainly, but be skeptical, okay? Because the last thing I want is for any of you to become a victim. Once again, this is Janet Gerson-Siegel for Semantic Shenanigans.
Music provided by Invocation Array. Send mail to hosts@semanticshenanigans.com. Follow us on Twitter at 2shenanigans. That's the number, not the word. 2shenanigans. On Facebook, you can find us at Semantic Shenanigans. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Semantic Shenanigans. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on Semantic Shenanigans.